guys, welcome back to User Experience Points. Last week the show took a break so I could enjoy the always lovely experience of hanging out with family and eating a lot of food. But this week we're back with Dragon Age Inquisition. This game is massive, so there's no way I could cover the entire user experience, but there's definitely some interesting examples that we can cover. I will say overall there's an impressive amount of consistency for how many different kinds of menus this game has, even if some of the design choices feel a little outdated. That said, the first thing we're going to talk about is the game's very modern onboarding process. See, the first step for anyone who wants to get the most out of this game is to go to the Dragon Age Keep website, which allows you to go through the major decisions from the first two games and essentially create a world state so that your personal history with this universe remains intact in the new game. BioWare normally accomplishes this by allowing players to import their saved files from previous games in a series, but since Inquisition is the first game in the series on a new generation of consoles, that old method was not possible. The fact that this even exists is amazing, but it's also a really pleasant user experience. I could probably do a whole episode on Dragon Age Keep itself, but I'm just going to talk about the experience after that once you start Dragon Age Inquisition. Once you've completed setting up your world state on the Dragon Age Keep website, you're ready to boot up Inquisition itself. I was delighted to see that all I had to do to import my world state was to log into Origin on my console. After that, it's seamlessly integrated into the character creation process, which we're going to talk about next. After you've chosen your race and class, you're dropped right into a very complex character editor. This experience is pretty similar to most role-playing games out there that allow you to create a character, but there's some really neat control innovations in the way you mold your character's face and select the colors for certain features. Rather than the traditional sliders that you see in most RPGs, Dragon Age uses a very interesting interface in which you simply move a cursor around to the up and right to increase the intensity of that feature. This is great because you're actually controlling the intensity of a feature on two axes instead of just moving a slider left and right. The large amount of space provided also gives users a stronger sense of control over how much they're adjusting, even to something as simple as their character's ears. Even more astounding is the color picker used to adjust the color of your character's eyes. This unique interface allows you to adjust the color and hue very quickly. You select a color using the left analog stick in a radial menu, and then you use the right analog stick with more traditional color picking to adjust the hue. It's immediately made clear that you use the left and right analog sticks, and then they get out of your way when you're trying to adjust the color. Another great feature is the way you can test out how your character looks when they're speaking anytime you want. I wonder where they got that from. Next, I have to briefly mention the options menu because it has amazing descriptions for all the different toggles and choices you can make. You can tell by the way these are written that BioWare has done some user research and they know what they need to assure players of. For example, with the hide helmets option, it's clarified that helmets are always hidden during dialogue sequences, which could be the only reason someone would have selected that, but knowing that, would be happy to keep it on. I keep it on because, seriously, look at this hat. Hell yes. The map screen is excellent. I'm very impressed with the way that you can highlight a specific region and then toggle between any quests that you currently have active there. This allows you to efficiently scope out your next destination without zooming into each region and checking on all the little icons. Further enhancing this experience is the way that your tracked quest icon appears on the region that it's in. Once you're in a region, you can select any icon to track the quest that's associated with it, giving you a clear waypoint to your next destination. You can also set a manual waypoint anywhere on the map. This is especially helpful if you're tracking a collectible quest that has multiple icons on the map, since you can set a manual waypoint on any one of them to better chart your route. My only complaint is the way the button prompt for switching between the world and region map is located at the top of the screen and separated from the other controls at the bottom. This has led to me hitting the circle button on the controller, which is labeled as back, many times, which backs you out of the map entirely instead of toggling. This is also done for the button prompt for switching your gender in character creation. I would be curious to see if this decision was informed by user testing, because this could just be a personal thing. But to me, it seems like it's unnecessarily hiding these important controls. Another map-like screen in Dragon Age Inquisition is the incredibly cool War Table. This is where, as the Inquisitor, leader of the Inquisition, you delegate out tasks that you don't necessarily have time for to your advisors. It's a lot to take in and can be frustrating with how tiny all the little map markers are, but this makes sense since there could potentially be a ton of these on screen if you let these missions pile up. Thankfully, both new and completed missions are marked very clearly. Though what's often less clear is the way rewards for these missions are presented. Sometimes it's pretty straightforward whether you've gained some new influence or an item, but other times it's a bit more confusing, like when the reward is simply approval from one of your party members. All you see is a snippet from their tarot card, and then you'll actually get the notification when you leave the war table. It's also confusing why certain missions remain on the map for no reason, even after they're completed. Aside from the major plot-altering story missions, it seems really arbitrary which missions stay on the map and which ones disappear once they're completed. Now let's talk about crafting items. First of all, I just want to say it's really cool. This is the first game I've played where you can finally craft a sword down to the hilt, grip, and blade that it has. That is awesome. It's also pretty impressive the way the crafting interface manages to be very consistent whether you're crafting armor, a sword, or an item from a requisition task. However, the layout for crafting items splits up important information unnecessarily. Crafting is done by filling the slot for each weapon with a material. When you're browsing materials for the slot in an item, your eyes have to dart around the screen constantly to see which slot you're in, how the currently selected material is affecting your item, and what the different effects that material can have on each slot. It's awesome that all that information is on screen, but it would have been nice to keep it a little closer together. Next, let's talk about the inventory screen. Switching between characters so you can manage everyone's equipment does work really well, but it is a little frustrating that there isn't any kind of filtering going on. No matter which character you have selected, all of the item categories are available to you. For example, if I'm looking at one of the mages in my party, the only weapon categories I should see are helmets, light armor, and staffs. Heavy armor, two-handed weapons, and all that other junk is just in my way. So far, the only time I've found it useful to have all of the item categories available to me is when I'm in a shop trying to figure out what to sell. The loading screens are an awesome idea that just doesn't seem to quite work as implemented. It's awesome that you actually have 3 different things to read on a loading screen, but the problem is you spend very little time here before just being sent to a black screen with a loading icon at the bottom right. This means if it's anything longer than 3 tips I can cycle through, then I'm probably not going to finish reading any of it before it just switches over to the black screen and the game finishes loading. Though I'm guessing some sort of technical limitations kept this from being possible. It would have been nice for this screen to be present during the entire loading process and allow the user to manually close the screen if the game finishes loading before they're done reading. By now you've seen a lot of the game's UI, and you've probably noticed one of its bigger problems. Visually, it's often unpleasant. Unfortunately, the fantasy aesthetic has claimed another UI.
Stupid Darkspawn ruined everything.
Text is often way too small or difficult to read because it's put on dark backgrounds. I totally get wanting to integrate the UI into the game's world, but legibility should always come first. This isn't a huge problem, and it becomes less and less of one the more you play the game and get used to it. But as we've seen with Skyrim, there's nothing wrong with using a clean, legible UI for a fantasy game. That goes for you too, Dragon's Dogma, as much as I love you. Which is a lot. And that wraps it up for this week. Thank you so much for watching. UXP is back on its regular schedule, so you can expect another episode next Friday. See you then.